again. So welcome to our last lecture on programming languages. Today we will look at the back-end development languages, and most will cover languages we have already seen, the use, and also, of course, the bigger picture. So that's the thing that I want to focus on today, of course, is the big picture of the back-end development. Again, some of you already do some back-end development, right? Two of you, all of you? So, right. So what do you use? Go, basically.
I use Golang, yeah.
Yes, all right. So what do? You write in Go. You use version control, of course, right?
Yes.
Right. You use what kind of database do you use?
Well, for now, for the project I currently
Yeah.
work on, we use VBA vector database.
All right. It's not even here, but yeah, we'll see. It's somewhere here. No.
I'm not sure if it will appear there. But
Okay, let me see this. Maybe what's the name?
VBA.
VV8. This one?
WEA.
WE8.
E like A like Apple.
Apple 8.
No, then V. No, VBA.
V.
Let me-
Let. I'll just call vector database because it's a new hotness, of course, right? IBM vector database. Let's see. We'll see if it appears here. Let's see. Where is it? VV8.
yeah.
VV8. So is there like a sort of 8 VV8? You mean number 8? It's used somewhere like in a name or no? Unfortunately, it's okay. 15 million. All right. But that's 2 years ago. That money is gone probably by now, right? So let's see this here. Let's see the link on. This is like 2 years ago. The money was flowing. You could make a startup with a vector database, and just wait for the check, right? So again, why? Basically because we have all of the LLMs have vectors, right? And you want the cosine similarity and other things, right? And well, that's a big promise, right? That some things will be faster than regular database. Okay, so
We also use technically.
of course, yeah, of course, caching, right?
Yeah, but if we have a need to use traditional database
Yeah.
in our company, then as far as I know, we use Postgres.
Postgres, yeah. By the way, yes. By the way, also it's not mentioned here. I don't know why it's not mentioned here. Well, it's mentioned here actually. It's actually mentioned as a. Let's see. What do they use check marks? Personal recommendation. Yeah. So yeah, actually, I like also. By the way, I agree with this recommendation. Postgres is much more serious. I would say more. How should I say? Has less. I would say bugs and things like compared to MariaDB and MySQL. MySQL and MariaDB, right? Roughly the same thing now, right? They have some limitations, right? And it's amazing how Postgres has been around as feature-wise, as far as open source databases, has been much consistently over the years. It's been the more reliable source, actually, right? But people used to go with MariaDB and MySQL because they were doing the LAMP stack, right? And and basically MySQL was included by default, right? So it's sort of like it's won by popularity, right? But anytime you have discussion of databases on if you need SQL, right, and you don't want to pay the huge licensing fees to Oracle, right, or Microsoft, or then Postgres, of course, is a reliable choice. Okay, great. So yeah, so this is basically so we know how internet works roughly, right? We use JavaScript. Well, okay. So these are the personal recommendations. So this is also choice of Go, but this is the hard part, and this is also hard part for your last assignment. You have to choose a language, right? Choose your poison, right? So whichever you feel the most comfortable, right? You could do. There's also Kotlin. Kotlin would work as well. Pretty much any language. Technically, you could write in C++, right? Technically, you could write in closures, but they use quite a bit as well. But you could write it in. Well, I suppose Prolog would be a really, really tough choice, right? You probably don't want to write a web server in Prolog, but there was somebody who wrote it in COBOL, right? We talk about COBOL, which is a language from 50s, right? You could write a web server in COBOL, which is a horrible choice, right? But I'll show you what it looks like. COBOL Web Framework. This is more like an April's joke, but it actually exists. COBOL and wheelchair, right? Yes. Right. COBOL and Cogs. This is actually COBOL and Cogs is the original one, right? So it looks like this, right? And get started, right? Get better, get involved, right? So that's what COBOL looks like, right? But yeah, this is a joke, but actually you could do this. Let's see what the web server would look like. Funny, funny, funny. This is like a joke from 15 years ago, I guess, but roughly, right? You don't really want to write a web server in COBOL. So what do you want in a server? When you're writing a server, right? You are going to be responsible for the routing, right? You probably, of course, and also producing content dynamically, right? You want to respond to the queries, right? So usually, of course, it involves a database. So like when you're writing something like service and Go, you probably have some sort of API endpoint, right? You have to handle, right? Provide some endpoints, right? And you basically have to respond to them appropriately, right?
Yes.
And you probably have a huge list, right? Your huge task list, right? And you just go through and fill them out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, roughly. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much a standard thing, of course, right? So, yeah, but of course, everything, the big picture, so you have your language, right? Again, you have to, of course, also inevitably, right? This doesn't mention, we'll talk about this here, right? If you choose a language, it doesn't end. What do you do next? You, of course, will want to have some libraries. Like if you, let's say if I click on Go, well, I guess I have to sign in. All right. So if you click on Go, right, you'll have a choice of some libraries, right? Do you use any specific framework? You have your custom?
So we have our custom framework.
Okay.
Zugo.
Zugo. Is it
It's
open
not
source?
Well, it's not well documented, but it is available.
All right. I think you mentioned this before, right? GitHub, where was it?
This right, Zugo.
Zugo, like this AZU Go?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Go framework.
Yes.
Super. Is that here? It's opinionated. That's good.
Yep.
Opinions are good, right? Because again, the thing is, right, if you're choosing a framework, you probably, well, 132 commits on it is, what's the last commit here? 3 months ago, not too bad, right? That's pretty decent, right? Yeah, if I saw something like this, I say, okay, yeah, this worth a look, right? At least there's somebody cares about this. There's 6 contributors, right? And things happen here, right?
Yeah.
Because the issue is this, so you have your language, and then you have the framework. So again, so framework is what compared to library?
It has, well, it's more opinion.
Yes, yeah, it provides some way of doing things, right? Library,
It has to write code in a specific way.
yes, and this is a good thing, because the idea is this, of course, if you choose sufficiently well-documented framework, right? Not in this case maybe, right? But in general, you have examples, and you have, of course, the community support, right? Then you know there's one way of doing it, or roughly the same page. Everybody's roughly on the same page, and you do the things the same page. Again, because of course, so it's written in Go, right? So there's a server, right? And it handles queries. Oh, there's a server there. Let's see what it looks like. All right. It includes some imports, right? Oh, yeah, very nice for a main server, of course, because you don't really want to see everything in there, right? So pulls everything off that, right? But essentially, what's happening underneath, right? Essentially, all this, there's lots of complexity, but underneath, basically, or server or backend or backside has to handle the incoming queries, right? They will be typically going to, of course, HTTPS, of course, right? These days, right? And they will follow some sort of schema, right? So it could be a JSON, right? Could be GraphQL, right? Those are the most, well, JSON most commonly, right? SOAP and GPRS, sort of like the old hotness, right? Sort of not so common, but still around sometimes, right? On some legacy systems, sometimes I don't think anybody wants to do it on a new project, but sometimes you do have it. GPRS, remote procedural calls, right? So, of course, okay, so you have queries, right? What else comes in? You have to worry about authentication, right? Is this going to be
Well, in my work, I haven't worried that much about that.
Okay.
Like other groups.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have JVP authentication.
Yeah, and the thing is, yeah, these things are really, you have to use, like, if you do it from scratch, people have said that really smart people, right? If you start learning about JVT or know out, right, you basically say, okay, there is something rotten. It's extremely, like the full specification and doing it properly is actually very hard to wrap your head around it, basically, right? So you have to trust it, right? Follow some guidelines, right? And again, probably use a framework which has a good support for this already, right? So you have to do as little work as possible. That would be my advice, basically, right? If you want to include authentication, right? So of course, there's other ways of doing it. Maybe you're doing it internally. It's for internet, not internet, right? So it doesn't get outside. So you say, okay, the network guys, let them handle that security. You know, they have firewalls, meaning nobody can go outside, cannot access this internal service. And then you don't worry about this, right? You assume everybody who has access to the address, right, you know, can use it basically. That's the easy way. You can just, you know, skip this part. But usually, of course, even then, you may want to do a double protection, right? You have the network security, right? You may limit some outside access, but not completely. But you still have the internal security as well, right? So, yeah. Of course, the old way of cookie-based authorization, of course, also, right? But the basic idea is, you know, you produce some sort of token, right? You produce some sort of, you know, hash or whatever you want to call it, right? And then it is in some ways included in the queries, right? You know, basically, when you set something in your queries, there is some sort of token, some sort of passkey or key, right? Authorization token, which it identificates on our server, can say, okay, yeah, that this person, right, can access this resource. Because what's the issue is? The issue is that fundamentally, web was meant to be stateless, right? Idea was, you know, when, what's the name, Tim Berners-Lee, right, in the early 90s, he made to be stateless, meaning each query lives by itself, right? So each query, right, is its own thing. But very quickly it became apparent we do want the state. We want to preserve this. We want some sort of, you know, continuity, right? You know, when you're going through multiple pages, right, you know, if you're doing shopping or whatever, right, you want to preserve this authorization flow, right? You want to be, actually, you don't want to log in for every page, right? That would be extreme, right? So that's another thing, right? So let's go about testing. What kind of testing do you guys do?
Unit tests
Yeah.
and Cypress tests.
Mm.
I guess integration tests.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So yeah, because there's actually like roughly 4 levels, right, of integration test. There's also system testing, like the whole thing. After the system, you know, acceptance testing, right, which means the client or the stakeholder says, okay, yeah, this works great. Right? Yeah, yeah, of course. Right. Do you have continued integration? Meaning you push, right, and everything happens automatically.
Well, to an extent, yeah, we have written pipeline to do.
Super. That's very good. Right. Yeah.
But sometimes I still go to the Docker Swarm to check the configuration.
All right. So we'll get Docker. So yeah, the thing is, again, this big picture, I really recommend this. Eventually, right, you want to deploy, right? Again, assuming I presume you don't have to deploy yourself, but you do use Docker, I imagine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that actually leaves me, I am thinking, actually, let me say about the homework, right? That I would probably I would like a Docker requirement for like getting a 10, actually.
I think I use Docker for Kotlin homework.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, because of course, the reason why I would like to add Docker, because that makes my life easier, right? And makes life for everybody easier. Because the idea is this, there's a famous saying, it works on my machine, right? Oh yeah, it works, yeah. You know, and it's common everywhere, not only for students, it's everybody. Yeah, it works. I wrote my homework, right, and teacher doesn't know how to, you know, run his, you know, his own, on his computer doesn't work, right? So Docker sort of solves this problem quite well, right? So idea is that you do have some pain points with Docker, but it offers this virtualization platform, right? And you run it basically, right? So it's extremely handy for deployment, because if you ever deploy some relatively project which includes multiple parts, right? Multiple actually servers running together, right? It's kind of pain. With Docker, it's basically as simple as running Docker compose up, a couple commands, you pull the, you know, you get the Docker container, right? And it works, right?
The only thing I hate about Docker is that you technically can debug a Docker container,
Yeah.
but it's never an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Usually you have to debug by running the program locally.
Yes.
And,
Yeah, I mean, there's various ways around. Of course, you have some sort of logs or something, right? You probably have shared.
You can log it, but you cannot set breakpoints or anything.
Yeah, of course, not like that. Yeah. So debugging is, of course, so it's like I said, it's, but the thing is again, assuming the poor developer has done all the, on the, also the system or DevOps engineer, whatever you want to call yourself, right? These days, doing all, juggling multiple balls at once. They have to do this, and then the end user should be very happy, right? The one who has to deploy it, right? The end product, right? Because you have everything working, and you don't have to worry about all these issues. Hopefully, right? So yeah. So the thing is, of course, is again, if we have these servers, right? Why do we have web servers at all, right? If you're having your own server, right? No, well, actually, it's very good to use an existing server, right? As sort of like a front end, basically. Like you don't have to worry about like secure connections. You want to provide, for example, HTTPS services, right? And of course, Apache or Nginx, right, has well-established, easy settings, well-established procedures to offer this, right? Because your server probably offers by itself only HTTP, right?
Yeah, I think it is Nginx.
Yeah, which is standard. It's like I said, this is what I recommend. So idea would be roughly, maybe I'll draw it, right? Nginx, right, would be the front end. So it would be the port, proxy basically, right? You put set up all this secure SSL, right? Everything, right? You maybe want to serve some static, right? Resource too, maybe some static pages already, right? And maybe some images and things like that also there, possibly, right? And all the dynamic, right?
One thing about the Nginx, when I want to run my front end
Yep.
Docker,
Yeah.
usually the ports that are mentioned in Nginx
Yeah.
config are different from what they are
Yeah.
in the Docker compose.
Yeah.
So
No.
I've changed the Nginx
Yeah.
file, but I should also avoid committing it.
Yeah.
So it does not get deployed and doesn't crash that environment.
So the question now is, right, are you running Nginx actually on the metal or on the server, or are you running Nginx in the Docker container also, or no? That's a good question. I mean,
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, okay.
I haven't researched Nginx at all.
yeah. No, of course, it's usually run, of course, on the server itself, right? And then, but you can run it also on Docker container. Theoretically, everything would be Dockerized, of course, right? So,
I think it's run on the Docker container because if I don't change the port,
yeah,
my front end just doesn't open up
yeah.
at all.
All right. So yeah, okay. So all right. So let's go next. So let's go to the next. Of course, then you might want to add some search functionality, and of course you could do some search yourself. But there are also existing solutions such as Elasticsearch, a very famous solution, very heavy actually. But again, because why? Because databases by themselves, basic SQL databases, don't do very well at like text search, things like that. They're not very good at it. They can do it, right? We saw the SQL syntax, but they are not actually. They are actually not optimized for this, right? So there are other solutions for this, right? And right, you have also probably have some real-time data coming in, right? Maybe you want to do some, some monitoring as well. And then again, we go to the no SQL databases, right? Again, key value, Redis, of course, is a major one because we can use it very quickly for caching, right? Widely used, basically, right? Notice here this needs to be updated to add the vector database now. Document database, MongoDB. Do you guys use MongoDB? No. So MongoDB is interesting. Again, I mentioned this before. With SQL database, it's a major alternative to SQL. It basically lets you do everything as JSON, but it implements its own binary JSON. So you can't edit directly the MongoDB databases, right? But the contents, your structure, is roughly looks like JSON, basically, like regular JSON, right? So Firebase is kind of cool, right? And you have column database, graph databases. I really like Neo4j. I use that for some of my work. It's like for graphs, right? Cool stuff. But yes, they need to add also a section on vector database here, right? Yeah. So yeah. And then you have to worry about if you want to do all of this, right? Learn all of this right here. Also, of course, scaling, right? Again, if you notice, you start looking at what's happening with your server. If it's semi-public, your traffic will be probably 80 or 90% bots, basically, right? Once it becomes public, right? You'll see this, right? So you need to see, okay, how do you handle this, right? Are you okay with it? Of course, to some extent you want that, right? You probably want Amazon. Well, I don't know if you want Amazon, but well, let's say you want probably Google at least to index you, right? Probably, right? your service. It's not if it's not meant to be strictly private. But of course, this is a huge issue these days, that all of these AI startups, not only startups, actually existing, AI, OpenAI, Claude, all of them do it. They're all crawling your sites and trying to extract some information, right? It's kind of funny. And people are complaining that they also scrape things which are not supposed to be scraped, like some things, some technical logs, things like that. Somehow they get it. If there's a link, right, they'll scrape it. And technically, they're not supposed to do this, because robots, if you are doing a web server, right, you can put a robots file, robots text, which has been around forever, right, which indicates, okay, only crawl these particular pages, and these don't crawl, do not go there, right? But these AI-based, these AI startup or AI bots, they ignore this. They ignore this and they crawl everything, right? So that's an issue. Yeah, I've been playing around. Of course, there's other side, of course. That might be, to me, I'm not too concerned about this one, but also, of course, there's also malicious actors. You'll see, I have some sites which are running just Nginx, and they have static front-end, basically single-page applications, roughly. And they don't really have a server back, right? It's kind of funny. I have my server logs, and I see all these PHP people trying to access some particular PHP page, like admin something, 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 right? They're trying to hit this page and hoping maybe there's like a WordPress engine, admin page or something like that, right? And, trying to hit the big win, right? And they will get into, obviously there's nothing there. I can just laugh because I'm running on Nginx and it's just static page. They get a nice fat, 404. Of course, I could do some mitigation. I could say, okay, if you try to hit too much, just, throttle them, right? But, if you have a static page, you don't have to worry about it. Right, so yeah, that's the issue. Of course, you have to handle, right? Because if you're doing a dynamic, you have a server-based, right? This means you have some queries where you don't have the content yet. You're going to be producing it, right? You're going to be accessing a database, right? And then you have a potential problem. If some bot makes 1,000 queries to your database in a second, possibly you could have some issues, right? Have you run into these kind of issues, Tal?
No.
Not yet.
No. Well, the websites I'm working on, they are mostly meant for clients.
Okay.
And they are login protected. Well, the bots won't get further.
Yeah, okay, so that's good too. But the thing is, again, yeah, even if you're logging problem, again, still, if you see that, again, if you allow public access and you don't limit any sort of, you're completely open, right, you will still see what I would call them, I guess, script kiddies, I guess, so, but, it could be very old people who are doing it too, right, accessing all these, running these really, I would say, stupid scripts, right, and trying to just hit, some of these basic entry points, basically, right. So, yeah, you could sort of, like, again, okay, if some IP hits you like 100 times, of course, you could ban them. What else can you do? You can do sort of slow ban, right? Like, there's this kind of cool idea. You have, okay, first entry, yeah, you get, if you reach some threshold, let's say 10 hits, right, and you see they are all mostly malicious, you can sort of throttle them, right? Allow the next entry after like 10 seconds, then a minute, then after 10 minutes, if you keep doing something badly, right, you keep getting throttled, basically. But then you have opportunity to make up, because, by the way, this is an issue. In general, I don't know if you run into this, but quite a few services actually ban Latvian IPs, actually, unfortunately, right? This means, say, at some point, somebody in Latvia did something bad, basically, at least on a Latvian telecom or TET, at least, right? So basically, they don't allow you to access. They say, okay, so this means your IP range, right? Especially, you have a big provider, one of the big ones, Balcom, BT, LMT, and of course TET, right? We are lucky we have huge IP ranges in Latvia, right? We are lucky, unlike there's one country, I forgot which was somewhere in Africa, it only has like 2 IP addresses for the whole country or something like that. That's really sad, right? Yeah, because they got to internet really late, and by then they just got us allocated like really very few addresses, right? So a really sad situation, right? So, but yeah, so that's another issue. Or web is getting fragmented these days, right? People are actually saying, okay, we don't want anything from Brazil or from Russia or anywhere, right? We just ban those addresses. In a way, yeah, it's understandable if you're a small-time, systems administrator, but for a big company, it's kind of a really lazy approach, right? So And of course, then we run into problems like from if you try and access some American source from Europe. Of course, sometimes there's GDPR regulations, and lots of American newspapers and running these news sources. They just don't want to worry about these European regulations. They just ban you from. They give you a warning basically, right? I'm sure you run into this before too, right? If I look at some American source and they say, okay, sorry, we do to. They might even give you they either give you a reason or they just don't give you any reason, right? Because we have stronger data regulations in Europe, right? Which is a good thing, of course, but there's a downside, of course, too, right? So, yeah, but okay. But it's all this again. So if you want to do everything, there's this huge field, right? So this is if you want to be a full stack, there's a lot of things to where you can sort of drill down into more detail, right? But essentially, at the end of the day, right, we are serving pages, we are responding to queries with something, with some content. That's all we are doing, basically, right? So, again, why do we actually, okay, so again, maybe let's go back to our starting question. Why do we need backend servers, actually, right? Why not do everything statically?
Well, because then the performance is reliant on the client's computer.
Yeah, but again, yeah, that's true, of course, because computer...
Also security-wise,
yeah.
backend is
Yeah.
more secure since you can process data however you want.
Yes.
Not sure how secure one can make the content, but
yeah.
And also the communication with other clients, that would be tricky.
Yes. Yeah. So of course, like I said, there's sometimes people. Okay, even if you do front end heavy, there still needs to be some hydration source, a data source at the end. At the other end, somehow it has to be connecting to these databases and resources. Okay. All right. What else? What else do we want to cover before the maybe like 2 more minutes, and then we take a small break. Now. Yeah, so web servers, we checked message brokers, MySQL databases, building for scale, right? Yeah, so of course, at some point, again, so going back to my question about the web servers in general, right? Why do we need these dynamic? The word dynamic, because we cannot possibly know all the answers, right? Our server side should be able to handle multi-queries, which, for things which have not been made yet. There's no web page for it yet, basically, right? There's no resource yet. It's going to be created dynamically, right? Somebody searched for some products, right? It's going to a shopping page, right? And they get there's a database query, multiple database queries. The page is built and presented to the user, basically, right? So this is, a big change, basically, because of course. Because the page did not exist. It's possible that next time maybe you do a caching, maybe you cache it for the next time, right? There are all kinds of little tricks we can use, but underneath there's the fact that our service or web application might possibly be showing pages which don't have yet exact content. I remember old days, like you could think, okay, which is kind of coming back, you can do things like you can pre-build some certain popular pages, basically, right? Make them static. So when I say static, it means you go to the page, static Nginx or Apache or any static server just serves the content. Content as it is, right? Maybe there's some JavaScript on it, of course, these days, right? But there's no active rebuilding of the source, basically, right? There's no real active data source. It just exists, basically, right? As it is, right? So, but that is, of course, sort of workaround as well these days. Yeah. I guess let's take a break till 12, and then we'll finish this discussion.